I'm not planning on speaking for too long today, to be honest. Sometimes you don't need to, do you? Sometimes it's enough to let the words and the actions speak for themselves. For those who are watching this online, we've just watched a clip from the Visual Bible, Gospel of John, chapters 18 and 19, and parts of chapters 18 and 19. I'll put the link in the description underneath the video for you to be able to watch for yourself, and for any of us who want to watch it again. Last week we left Jesus and the disciples on a real cliffhanger. If it had been an EastEnders episode, we would have finished with the duffs, doof, doof, doof. Jesus had been arrested and taken before Annas and Caiaphas, the Jewish religious leaders. I was thinking about this. I was thinking, who would be the equivalent today in the UK? I suppose if your background is Anglican, Church of England, then the Archbishop of Canterbury would probably be the equivalent. I mean, he's about as high as you can go in hierarchy terms. I was thinking of it as a Baptist, because we don't really do hierarchy in the Baptist Church, but we have a General Secretary of the Baptist Union of Great Britain, and Lynn Green is our General Secretary. And I don't suppose, where the ultimate buck stops is on Lynn's desk. But she's not as shiny as the Archbishop of Canterbury, with all of the gear and the titles. But the religious leaders, Annas and Caiaphas, the people who are the guardians of the temple, they're the guardians of the Jewish religion. They are the actual representatives of God on earth. I mean, that's how they saw themselves, and that's how the people saw them. You want to know what God thinks about something? Go see Annas and Caiaphas. Actually, Caiaphas was the high priest that year, and Annas, as we saw, was his father-in-law. And they both had that supreme power in the temple, but not in the land. See, more than anything, they wanted Jesus dead. This man who claimed to be God, this man who claimed to forgive sins outside of the temple, this man who was coming in saying he was bringing a new kingdom, this man who was threatening everything that they had built and structured, he had to die. But they couldn't kill him. They didn't have the authority. And see, this is part of the awful irony of what was happening here. The religious leaders were desperately wanting, as well as all of the Jewish people, they were desperately wanting a Messiah to come. They wanted a military Messiah who was going to come in and overthrow Rome, get the Romans out of Israel, so that the Jews, God's chosen people, could exercise their own laws and set their own taxes and basically rule their own land, have authority in their own land. But when the promised Messiah is standing in front of them, not only do they not recognise him, they go simpering and cowering and sucking up to the people that they hate and despise most in the whole world to try and get their plans into place. But John, in our passage, makes it very obvious who has the power and who is powerless here. So the religious leaders, they're powerless to do anything without Rome. So they have to send Jesus to Pilate. And Pilate is the Roman governor of the area. There'd been no more so-called kings since Herod the Great. Instead, now there were governors installed in areas very much under the direct authority of the emperor. Only the Emperor of Rome had the authority to sentence someone to death, which he did through delegated responsibility to his governors. So the powerless religious leaders send Jesus to Pilate. And I know it's obvious because he's the Roman governor, but sometimes it's worth pointing out the obvious. Pilate is not a Jew. He doesn't share the belief system of the Jewish people. Pilate is Roman, with all of the superstitions and beliefs shared by all of the Roman people. Now Roman people worshipped a plethora of gods. You'll have heard of some of them. Jupiter, Mars, Mercury, Neptune, Venus. Have you heard of them? But they worshipped worshipped so many more, and they were always open to the idea that there were more gods than they knew of. And they were shrines to the unknown God. In Athens, there's a whole temple dedicated to the unknown God. But more than that, more than this idea that there are more gods than they know, that Romans also believed that gods could take on human form and visit Earth. The Roman emperor believed himself to be a son of God. That was one of his official titles. And the Roman people, they believed that the emperor was a demigod himself. And we know that the people believed that gods could visit Earth as human beings. Because you know that passage when Paul and Barrabus go out and they heal a lame man? The people come out bringing gifts and bulls and everything and worshipping them because they think they are the gods come to visit them. So we have to understand that all of this is going round in Pilate's head as Jesus stands in front of him. And he's trying to figure out who Jesus is. Is he a God visiting Earth? Where is he from? What's all this about? And that's why he's asking Jesus, where are you from? He's not talking about what province or what town or what area. He's asking Jesus, where do you come from? Ironically, he doesn't want to do anything that could inadvertently bring the wrath of God on him. But there's one line in there that really stood out to me with regards to power and authority and who has it and who doesn't. Pilate basically says to Jesus, you need to answer my questions. He says, you need to answer my question. Don't you realise that I am the one who has the power to kill you or to set you free? Don't know even if Pilate believes that at that point. Because realistically, he knows by now he has no power. At this moment, in this decision of what happens next to Jesus, Pilate is completely powerless. From a practical, earthly sense, he daren't upset the crowd. The mob are out there, they're baying for Jesus' blood, even to the point of demanding the release of a known criminal and murderer. If Pilate was to let Jesus go free now, it could turn into a riot. So Pilate is powerless in the face of the mob. Even though he's told the crowd time and time and time again he can find no guilt in Jesus, no reason to sentence him to death, he can't let him go. The crowd would lynch him. What he doesn't realise is that he is also powerless in the face of God. Because you see, this is how it was always going to be. This was always God's plan. Because Jesus, the Messiah, the anointed one of God, is the suffering servant, the one promised so long ago by the prophet Isaiah. He is the one who would come and bring healing and forgiveness, hope and salvation through his suffering and his death. Right from the start of his ministry, Jesus has said that he has come to die, not to kill, but to be killed. And he's even told the people the way he would die, that he would be lifted up on a cross. John chapter 12, verse 32 says, this is Jesus speaking, he says, and when I am lifted up from the earth, I will draw all people to myself. See, this was always how it was going to be. And Pilate, even though he thinks he holds the place of power, he is powerless to stop it. John's telling of the actual crucifixion, of the actual cross, is the shortest of all of the Gospels. I mean, he goes into so much detail with the build-up and the trial and everything around it. But the cross itself, did you notice what was missing? There was no, Father, forgive them for they don't know what they're doing. He doesn't put that in there. There was no, into your hands I commit my spirit. We've got no temple curtain splitting in two. Just the simple words. It is finished. It's done. It's completed. Jesus has done what he came to do. He has been lifted lifted up. And for John, this is what the whole of his gospel is pointing towards. This is Jesus in his glory. This is Jesus high and lifted up. And now it is finished. See, for the other gospel writers, this is Jesus' passion, this is his suffering, this is his darkest hour, his lowest time. And glory comes with the resurrection. But for John, the cross is Jesus' greatest accomplishment. He has done it. He has absorbed all of the hatred, all of the beatings, all of the aggression, all of the anger, all of the sin, all of the shame, everything that the world can throw at him, and he has nailed it to the cross. It is finished. But you know what really stood out to me this time as I was reading? It's the whole Barrabus thing. Which is bonkers, really. Because I've read this passage at least once a year for almost the last 30 years. But you know how God does that sometimes. You'd be reading and he brings another bit to life, draws your attention to something that you know, but maybe you just stopped seeing because it was so familiar. And that's, I think, how I got with this passage. But Barrabus, Judah and Jerusalem was full of people who wanted to overthrow the Romans by fair means or foul. The Zealots were one such group. Their sole ambition was to get rid of Rome. I mean, not completely, but, to boot them out of Judea, to boot them out of Jerusalem. And the Zealots, like most groups, they had extremists. Nowadays, we would call them terrorists or assassins. And these Zealots, they would go to public places and they would kill Romans if they got the chance. But not just Romans, they would also kill people who they felt were friendly with Rome, collaborators. This was rebellion. This was insurrection. This was terrorism. This was a crime punishable by crucifixion. Actually, just as an aside, thieving, stealing, wasn't a crime punishable by crucifixion. That was a horrendous, torturous punishment saved for the worst offenders. Murder, rape, rebellion, insurrection, terrorism. These were the things punishable by crucifixion. Stealing, not so much. So when the other gospel writers tell us of the person on the cross that we have translated to be the thief on the cross next to Jesus, actually a better translation from Greek would be the brigand, or the rebel, the insurrectionist. So actually, the man on the cross was actually more of a penitent terrorist than a penitent thief. And we are clearly told that Barrabus had been involved in an uprising. He was a rebel, he was a terrorist and a murderer. And so when Pilate stands before the crowd and the religious leaders and he offers to free Jesus, to have him whipped and punished to keep everyone happy, but ultimately to let him go, the people instead shout for the guilty man to go free. That really, really got me this time. Barrabus, a murderer, a terrorist, a guilty man who has stood trial and been found guilty and deserving of death. He gets to go free. And Jesus, an innocent man, the only truly innocent man, takes his place. Jesus or Barrabas, King of Kings or a guilty man. And Jesus stands before Pilate because of the lies, the schemes, the false testimonies that have been made against him. The truth stands there in person. The truth stands there going to his death instead of the murderer, the innocent for the guilty. And it's happening right there on that stage, in that theatre, right in front of Pilate, right in front of Caiaphas, right in front of the religious leaders. But they just can't see it at the time. But right there, played out on that stage, is what the cross is about. It's what it's always been about. That Jesus will die for Barrabas and for the whole of Israel and for the whole world. And for you. And for me. The innocent for the guilty. And we get to go free. And that's why in that final moment he could declare, it is finished. As I reflected on all this week, as I started to put my thoughts down on paper, actually there were two songs that were going around my head. I had to choose one of them. The one that says, "It was my sin that held him there until it was accomplished. His dying breath has brought me life. I know that it is finished." But the song that I've gone with is the one that was going round and round and round in my head. It's the song that we are going to finish with. It speaks so clearly of what Jesus did and why. "My Lord, what love is this that pays so dearly, that I, the guilty one, may go free." With the wondrous chorus, "Amazing love, oh what sacrifice, the Son of God given for me. My debt he pays, and my death he dies, that I might live." So we're going to sing. And as we sing, remember again what Christ did for you. As we see love in action, love that went to the cross, love that was poured out even to death, so that I, the guilty one, may go free. Let's stand and sing.